Hello there, and welcome to Snail Story. How's your week been, no matter how busy the world out there may be? We hope these next few minutes with today's story bring you a little warmth and a renewed belief in kindness. Today's Snail Story invites you on a moving journey that began on a snowy night when a homeless man gave away his last coat to a stranger unaware. She was a CEO who would go on to change his entire life. From a small act of compassion, they rewrote each other's futures, overcoming grief, healing old wounds, rediscovering family, love, and a home not perfect, but truly happy. If this story touches your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Snail's Story so you won't miss more beautiful stories like this. 1. Now then, let's begin. The wind barreled down the streets of Portland like it had a score to settle. Snow swirled in furious spirals, smearing the city's hard edges into something soft and hushed. It was the kind of night that scraped down to the bone, where even buildings seemed to huddle against the cold. Elias Carter, 47, stood under the flickering light of a half-dead street lamp, his breath curling into the night like smoke. His jacket, a thrift store olive green thing that had seen better decades, was zipped up to his throat. But it did little against the wind. He clutched a leather folio to his chest, the corners bent and frayed, the zipper rusted. Inside were 6 resumes, and the 6th interview that day had gone the same as the 5 before it. Polite nods, lingering glances at his worn shoes, and a hand on the shoulder that said good luck and meant not a chance. The digital clock on the pharmacy across the street blinked 8:12 p.m. in angry red. The bus was late. His boots had soaked through hours ago, and he'd stopped feeling his toes. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the wind slap his face awake. Behind his eyelids, he saw Micah's face 10 years old. Gap-toothed smile, hair sticking up in that annoying cowlick he never brushed down. Back at the old truck they called home, Micah would be curled up in the back seat under a blanket patched from 3 others, waiting for Elias to come back with either a job or more silence. He was just about to lower his head when he heard the staccato click of heels on concrete. Not hurried, not confident either, just deliberate. A woman emerged from the white blur. No coat, only a pencil skirt and a light blouse that clung to her frame like paper. Her arms were folded tight across her chest, her steps precise but faltering, wet hair plastered to her cheeks. Her lips were blue at the corners. She stopped beside him under the narrow awning, shivering. Her eyes avoided his, fixated on the arriving bus that wasn't coming. Elias tried not to stare. She was striking not in that magazine cover way, but in the way a clean break in glass could catch the light. Beautiful, polished, but clearly breaking apart in the cold. She rubbed her hands together, as if friction could save her. He looked away. People passed each other like ghosts in this city. You were supposed to keep your eyes down, keep your story to yourself. That's how it worked. But then a gust hit harder than the rest, and she flinched. Her shoulders curled inward, and for a split second she looked small. Fragile, Elias hesitated. His jacket wasn't much, and God knew he needed it, but not more than she did. Without a word, he shrugged it off. The cold punched him in the ribs as he stepped toward her. "Here," he said, holding it out. She looked up, startled. "You don't have to, I know," he said, voice low. "But take it anyway." There was a pause, the kind that hangs, like a breath before a leap. "I'll be fine," she insisted, though her teeth betrayed her with a sharp chatter. He managed a small smile. "I've got another one at home." It was a lie. He didn't. Still, when she didn't move, he gently draped it over her shoulders. Her hands clutched it instinctively. The warmth surprised her. The jacket smelled like old soap, maybe coffee. It wrapped around her like something remembered. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded, folding his arms across his now chilled chest. They stood in silence, the wind swirling like it was looking for someone else to hurt. A minute passed. 2. Then she glanced at him sideways. "What's your name, Elias?" "I'm Celine." He nodded again. "Nice to meet you, Celine." "You really didn't have to give me your jacket," she said, her voice soft now. He shrugged. "I've had worse nights." The rumble of the bus finally came, headlights cutting through snow. Celine took a step toward the curb, then turned back. "Do you have somewhere to go?" she asked. Elias offered a half-shrug. "Somewhere," he said, not mentioning the beat-up. Ford parked behind a warehouse on Blackwell Street. Celine reached into her clutch and pulled out a small card. She held it out to him. "In case you ever need something." He took it, sliding it into his folio without looking. He'd been given cards like that before. None of them meant anything. She boarded the bus. Before the doors closed, she turned once more, her eyes meeting his. The jacket swallowed her frame, too big and worn, but it wrapped her in something that felt like a promise. Elias stood watching until the bus disappeared down the frozen street. Alone again. But as he stood there, arms wrapped around himself, it wasn't just the cold that made him shiver. It was something else, something small, quiet, and alive. He looked up at the sky, then down at the empty sidewalk. "Maybe tomorrow," he murmured, and then he walked into the snow. The old truck sat hidden behind an abandoned warehouse on the southern edge of Portland, as if it knew it wasn't welcome. A 1995 Ford, its silver paint peeling in patches. The windshield dulled by a film of snowy dust, and the heater dead since last year. But for Elias, Carter, and his son, this was home. Elias opened the driver's door, slid in, and gently shut it behind him. Inside, it was dark, quiet, and colder than he remembered. He exhaled slowly, his breath turning into a soft white mist that hung in the cramped air in the back. Sprawled across the seat under an old comforter was a sleeping boy Micah, 10 years old, clutching a worn-out pillow. In the faint glow of a distant streetlight, Elias could make out the slight furrow of his brows, the lips moving faintly in dreams. Maybe dreaming of his mother. Elias didn't turn on the light. He didn't want to break the fragile peace of the moment. Instead, he reached for the glove compartment and pulled out a small, dented metal box. Inside was all that remained of a past life, a single, slightly faded photograph in it. Eva, his wife, was smiling brightly, her blonde hair loosely tied, her hand resting on Micah's shoulder when the boy was just 5. Summer sunlight poured into the frame. There had been waves, laughter, the smell of strawberries. Now all of it lived only in memory. "Good night, Eva," Elias whispered. "Good night, kiddo." He tucked the photo back into the box, closed it, and put it away. Then he looked over at his son, his heart filled with both warmth and ache. 3 years ago, a car accident had taken Eva from them. A drunk driver ran a red light, and in an instant, Elias's life veered into a direction no one ever wants. He quit his job to handle the funeral, to care for Micah. But when the savings ran dry, everything began to unravel. They left their tiny apartment with the west-facing balcony, moved into a shabby motel room, and eventually into this truck. But Elias had never let Micah see the full truth. To his son, the truck was Satellite Station 4. Dinner was special mission soup. And every morning, Elias still shaved, buttoned a clean shirt, and walked his boy to school like any other dad. He once told a shelter worker, "I still cut my hair, still shave. My son needs to believe things will get better, and I need to look like I believe that too." Elias did whatever work he could find. Hauling, roofing, fixing pipes, mopping floors in office buildings at night. No job lasted long, but he never turned anything down. Every time he got called for an interview, he hoped. Every time it went nowhere, he folded the resume, forced a smile, and told Micah, "That's okay. There'll be another one tomorrow." Tonight, after giving his only jacket to a stranger, Elias came back to a cold that gripped his skin. But he didn't regret it. That woman Celine looked like she was unraveling beneath the snow. He didn't know who she was or where she came from. He just knew, if he didn't stop, no one else would. In the pocket of that jacket, he had kept something important, Micah's letter from that morning. But now, the jacket was gone. Elias frowned slightly. He wasn't bothered by losing the jacket. What hurt was losing that letter. It had held his son's entire heart. That morning, as Elias got ready for a job interview, Micah handed him a folded piece of paper, his face unusually serious. "You can't look until you get there," Micah said, eyes shining. "It's a secret message." Elias had laughed, but he never got the chance to read it. He shoved it into his pocket and rushed out so he wouldn't miss the bus. Now it was gone. He sighed, pulled the blanket higher over Micah, and leaned his head against the window, the cold pressing into his shoulder. But he didn't sleep. He couldn't. Instead, he quietly thought about the look in Celine's eyes when she accepted the jacket. She looked tired, but not in a physical way. More like the kind of weariness that comes from something deeper and old fracture inside. He didn't expect to see her again. But some part of him, the part that still believed in goodness, whispered that maybe, something had begun from that one small act. And if tomorrow turned out to be just another day where nothing changed, Elias would still get up, still go. For Micah, for Eva, and for the part of himself that still hadn't gone dark. Celine. Vaughn's apartment was on the 34th floor of the Navasera glass tower. From that height, all of Portland stretched out like a charcoal gray painting, rooftops blanketed in snow, streetlights distorted by fog, and the faint trails of passing cars gliding by like memories. She stepped into the sleek, minimalist space, elegant, but cold like an art gallery. No family photos, no books of memories, just flawless furniture and perfect lighting, carefully designed kind of loneliness. She dropped her handbag onto the blackwood table, bent down to remove her shoes, and slipped off the oversized coat Elias had given her. Her hand brushed against something lumpy in the inner pocket. She froze with slender fingers. She gently pulled out a small piece of paper, folded into quarters. The edges were crinkled, with creases as if it had been clutched tightly. A faint scent of waxy crayons still lingered. Celine sat down on the couch and unfolded the paper. A child's drawing appeared. 2 stick figures, one taller labeled Dad, one smaller labeled Me, stood under a round sun with 3 shining rays. Between them was a slightly crooked red heart, and underneath, in messy scrawl, were the words, "Mom is in heaven praying for you. I believe you can do it. You got this, Dad." Celine let the paper fall into her lap, her hands trembling. Something opened inside her chest, not loud. It's not dramatic, just a small crack, enough to let the wind in. She stared at the line, "Mom is in heaven," as if someone had reached deep into her mind and tugged an old memory from the very bottom drawer. Her mother had been like that, too, always smiling, always hugging, always singing lullabies when Celine was scared of thunder. But her mother had died when Celine was 7. A sudden accident. No time for goodbyes. And after that, silence. Her father hadn't known how to cope. He disappeared just 3 months after the funeral, leaving her to the foster system they liked to call temporary, but which lasted her entire childhood. Celine had forgotten that she'd once been the little girl curled up at night, wishing someone would tuck her in and whisper goodnight. She had learned to survive on her own, to build a steel shell so no one could see her hurt. She studied hard, tested higher, worked like a machine. She built Navasera from scratch, became CEO at 32, a symbol of resilience. But right now, in front of a child's clumsy drawing, all that armor seemed to melt away. She placed the letter on the table, then looked again at the coat. The fabric was worn at the cuffs, the seams fraying in places. Its faded blue had likely been washed by sun and rain for years, and yet the coat now carried a strange weight. It held a child's heart, the loss of a family, and something Celine didn't dare name hope. She stood, picked up the coat, and hugged it to her chest like someone embracing a lost piece of childhood. The smell of old fabric, cheap soap, and something else, life. Imperfect, but warm. And then, like her body suddenly remembered how to breathe through pain, a sob slipped out. And for the first time in years, Celine Vaughn cried. Not for work, not for exhaustion, not for weakness, but because someone had reminded her that, deep down, she was still a child longing to be seen and loved. She gently placed the drawing back on the table, smoothing the folds like one might smooth a prayer. The name Micah echoed in her mind like a sad little song. I believe you can do it. A child placing his faith in a father who had lost everything. And that father, living in a freezing truck, had given away his last coat. Celine exhaled. She looked out the window, where snow was still falling, in slow, silent drifts. Maybe the world wasn't entirely broken. Maybe there were still people like Elias Carter. And maybe, lest she wouldn't be able to turn her back on them. 3 days had passed since the snowy night and the old coat. Celine Vaughn hadn't told anyone about Elias Carter. She didn't mention the coat in meetings, didn't explain why it had disappeared from her shoulders when she left the bus stop that night. But since that evening, in her perfect high-rise apartment, she hadn't been able to sleep deeply. The crayon drawing by a child still lay on the desk in her living room. Celine hadn't put it away. She hadn't reread it either. She didn't need to. She had memorized every line, every crooked letter. The name Micah now echoed in her mind like a name she'd known forever. On Wednesday morning, as the Portland sunlight filtered through the antique glare windows, Celine pressed the intercom and called Rachel, her longtime assistant. I need you to find someone, she said, her voice low but firm. No full name, just a time, a place, a description, and one name. Elias. Rachel looked up, unable to hide her surprise. Who is he? Celine held out Micah's drawing, offering no further explanation. Start from the bus stop at Wesley and 9th, Saturday night. Around 8:30, there are traffic cameras in that area. Check all footage of any man giving his coat to a woman. I need to know who he is, where he is, as soon as possible. Rachel didn't ask again. She left with the urgency of someone who understood this wasn't just another task. Just a few hours later, Rachel returned with a blurry printout from a surveillance video. A silver Ford truck. The plate's fuzzy, but it matches a 1995 registration. Parked consistently behind an old warehouse in South Portland. A man and a child had been seen entering and leaving multiple times. Celine stared at the image. Blurry, but unmistakable. She didn't make a call, didn't send an email. She just sat in silence, staring out the window where snow continued to fall gently. The next morning, she left the office early, something that had never happened in her entire career at Nova Serra. Celine sat in the back seat of a dark SUV, quiet. As the car rolled through neighborhoods she rarely, if ever, visited. The roads were uneven, shops boarded up, a different Portland, far from her world. The car stopped across the street. She rolled down the window. Through the thin veil of snow, she saw the old Ford's silver paint peeling, dust coating the frame. Parked crooked beside a weathered warehouse. She didn't need confirmation. But Celine didn't get out. Didn't approach. For nearly an hour, she sat motionless in the vehicle. Watching through the cold fogged glass, She saw Elias step out, wearing a thin jacket, shoulders slightly hunched against the wind, a thermos in one hand. My kosherly Makoj. Down from the truck bed, backpack slung over one shoulder. The boy looked neat, jacket zipped up to the chin, and his hair, despite a rebellious cowlick, was carefully combed. They walked together toward the bus stop. No idea they were being watched. No performance, no effort to impress. They were just living, and Celine kept watching. Over the next 4 days, she saw Elias in many places. At a construction site, bent over lifting bags of cement, wiping sweat with his sleeve. At the old community center, fixing a roof, checking pipes, refusing extra pay. On the street, helping an old woman cross, picking up a dropped grocery bag. For a stranger, no applause, no cameras, no one calling his name. And he still did it all. Saturday night, she saw him and Micah eating dinner in the truck. 2 cups of instant noodles. 2 plastic spoons, a flashlight clipped to the rear-view mirror. Then Elias read Astoria's voice calm, pausing at the right moments while Micah leaned into his shoulder, face peaceful like he was inside a real home. Celine turned away, eyes stinging. Not out of pity, but admiration. She had met too many. People who were kind only when someone was watching. But Elias Ivan, with no one watching, was exactly who he was. The next morning, Celine sat alone in her office. The old coat still hung behind the door. She smoothed out Mika's drawing again, then looked out the window. There was no more doubt. That man wasn't a fleeting moment. He was the right thing. That day. The weather eased a little, as if winter itself had grown weary of waging war on the city. The snow had stopped falling. The gray sky hung still. But the air had lost its biting edge. Elias Carter had just finished mixing a tub of mortar at the edge of a construction site when someone called his name from behind. Mr. Carter. He turned, squinting against the light. Specks of dried cement still clinging to his rolled-up sleeves. Standing there, a long gray wool coat that reached her knees, was the last person he expected to see Celine Yvonne. No makeup, no sunglasses, no bodyguards, just her, surrounded by concrete and steel pipes. Her smoky gray eyes locked onto his. Elias froze for a moment, then quickly set down the bucket and wiped his hands on his pants. "You? I didn't think I'd see you again," he said, his voice slightly hoarse. Celine smiled, a little shyly. "I kept the coat," she said. "Haven't washed it. It still smells like old coffee." He gave a sheepish chuckle. "Yeah. Sorry." "About that, don't be." She shook her head. "It's like a memory that's still alive." They stood in silence for a few seconds. No soundtrack, no cinematic filter. Just 2 people, in a day that was completely real. "You came here for the coat?" Elias asked, glancing around as if worried someone might notice. "No," Celine replied. "I came for you." That made Elias instinctively take half a step back. "I don't think I have anything someone like you could possibly need," he said, voice low. "You do," she said softly. "Something no one else has." He frowned, part curiosity, part caution. "You have Micah," she added. "And a heart that still knows how to give, even when there's nothing left to hold on to." Celine pulled a slim envelope from her coat pocket. "I'm not here to thank you. I'm here to make an offer." Elias took it, opened it. Inside was a neatly printed document. The bold title read, "Position Offer. Head of Technical Oversight, Humanitarian Projects, Nova Serra Corporation." He looked up, eyes full of disbelief. "You're joking? I'm completely serious." "You know I live in a truck, right?" "I do, and I still want you," she said. Because no one understands numbers better than someone who's lived at rock bottom. Elias said nothing. his lips pressed together, eyes squinting like he was facing too much light. "You don't have to do this," he murmured. "I'm not a charity case." "You're not," Celine said, unwavering. "You're a choice, and the only one I trust for this position." He laughed, not bitterly, just stunned. "You don't even know what I used to do." "I know." "You were an engineer," she said, her voice gentler now. "And I know that today you're someone strong enough to rebuild not just structures, but trust." They stood in silence for a moment. From afar, the buzz of a saw echoed. A worker shouted something. Micah was kicking a stone near a pile of supplies. Elias glanced over at his son. Then back to Celine. "Micah has no one but me." "And I'm not trying to replace you," Celine said. "But I think maybe you deserve a firmer ground to stand on. Not just to survive, but to rebuild." She took a step back. "No pressure. If you say no, I won't come back. But if you say yes, 9 a.m., Monday, 18th floor, Nova Serra." Elias didn't answer. He just nodded. A slow, hesitant nod. Celine turned to leave. "Oh," she added, without looking back. "And Micah, that boy, deserves to see his father not just standing, but standing tall." She walked away, the sound of her heels fading into the background noise of the site. Elias looked down at the paper in his hand. A streak of cement had smudged one corner, but the text remained clear. He didn't know if he had the strength to believe in opportunity again. But in this moment, somewhere inside him, the part still warm beneath the snow was slowly waking up. Monday, 8:52 a.m., Elias stood on the sidewalk in front of the Nova Serra building, wearing a crisply ironed white shirt, his hands trembling slightly in his pockets. The suit he wore was borrowed, an old one, from a friend who used to work construction. The pants were tight around the thighs. The leather shoes carefully cleaned, but still bore visible cracks. He looked like someone who had just stepped out of another time, and, in truth, he had. The glass doors slid open with a soft ding. Elias took a deep breath and stepped inside, his pace slow, cautious, as if the marble floors might recognize that he didn't belong here. The Nova Serra lobby was stunning, vaulted ceilings, natural light spilling across every surface, the scent of oak and fresh coffee mingling like a high-priced welcome. He paused at the reception desk. Before he could say a word, a familiar voice greeted him. "Good morning, Elias." Celine approached, her posture upright, gaze steady but unhurried. Today, she wore a white blouse and tailored black trousers, her hair neatly tied at the back of her neck. And there was something in her eyes that said this was not just a courtesy meeting. Elias swallowed hard. "I really didn't think I'd walk into this place, and yet, here you are." Celine smiled, then gestured. "Come with me." They walked through the main lobby, and the elevator doors opened before she even pressed the button. A suited employee nodded respectfully at Celine and stepped aside. Elias felt like everything in this building ran on a different logic, fast, silent, flawless. The elevator stopped at the 18th floor. A glass-walled office came into view. No nameplates, no logos, just a space filled with light overlooking the city of Portland. Celine motioned for him to take the seat across from her. "Do you know why I asked you here?" she asked, pouring 2 cups of coffee. Elias shrugged, honest. "All I know is I'm scared to pieces I'll screw something up." Celine chuckled softly. "Good. Being scared means you care." She pulled out a proposal and slid it across the table toward him. "Head of Technical Oversight, Humanitarian Projects." Elias hesitated, then opened to the first page. The job descriptions danced in front of his eyes. Overseeing construction, quality for affordable housing, tuition-free schools in rural areas, community rehabilitation centers, but I've never led a team. I don't have any new certifications. I live in a truck, Elias said, his voice trailing off. And that's exactly why I chose you. Celine replied. He looked up, disbelief clear in his eyes. You have more real-world experience than anyone I've ever interviewed for this role. You know what it means to have a roof that actually shelters someone? You don't read about life, you live it. Elias clenched his fists slightly. Aren't you afraid people will think this is charity? Celine tilted her head, calm and firm. If anyone thinks that, they can come ask me. And I'll say, no one in this company understands the word humanitarian better than Elias Carter. A long pause stretched between them. Elias glanced down at the contract. Near the bottom, in small print, it read, starting salary, $85,000 a year. Includes full medical benefits and 6-month housing assistance. He took a breath. Micah would have his own room. Micah will have a warm bed, new books, and a father who no longer has to choose between dinner and a full gas tank. Elias looked out the window. The city buzzed outside. But here, in this quiet office, time seemed to pause, waiting for his decision. I never thought I'd get a second shot. Celine nodded. But you already started on the night you gave me your last coat. Elias turned toward her, his eyes slightly glassy. You really believe I can do this? It's not belief, she said. It's knowing. He was silent. For a long time, then he placed his hand over the contract. Then, I'll give it a shot. Celine stood and reached out her hand. Her grip was steady, warm. Welcome to Nova Serra, Elias. As Elias stepped out of the building, the wind picked up. But this time, he didn't shrink from it. In his pocket was a new contract. And in his heart, something he hadn't felt in a long, long time, the belief that tomorrow might actually be better. Asterisk, there was no grand welcome. No company-wide email introducing him on the official website. Elias Carter's first day at Nova Serra began with a lukewarm cup of coffee, a temporary ID badge, and a distant nod from the head of operations. You'll be working out of the meeting. Room on the 7th floor for now, the manager said without a smile. Don't touch the whiteboard. That's marketing's campaign calendar. Elias nodded, thanking him in a quiet but steady voice. He hadn't expected flowers or cake. He needed was a place to begin. The 7th floor meeting room had no windows. The leather chair squeaked as he sat down. On the table was a thick binder titled Humanitarian Projects Overview Q1. Elias opened to the first page. Lines of text, diagrams, budgets et al. Unfolded like a construction site half-finished. He picked up a pen, read, underlined, took notes. He worked as if he was rediscovering himself. On day 3, a young employee poked her head in, curiosity in her eyes. You're Carter, right? The new guy? I'm Zoe. I work in product design. Elias nodded. Nice to meet you. Zoe looked at him, hesitant. I heard you used to live on the street. Elias didn't flinch. He nodded. More or less, but I never left life behind. Pressed her lips together, then offered a faint smile. That's a really good line. Bit by bit, Elias began to be seen. He didn't teach, didn't mentor, didn't give TED Talk-style speeches. Instead, he listened. A young engineer complained about burnout from endless deadlines. Elias didn't offer advice. He simply asked, when's the last time you had dinner without your phone in hand? A programmer was anxious about losing her spot due to declining performance. Leah said, you're not a number. Even when people try to turn you into one. An intern cried in the break room after being scolded publicly. Elias quietly sat beside her, placed a glass of water in front of her, and said, crying is how the skin breathes when the heart can't. Day by day, the empty chair next to Elias began to fill, first out of curiosity, then out of the need to be heard, then out of trust. One day, The same head of operations, the man who'd handed Elias the temporary badge, came to him. "Maybe you should hold a little company talk," he said. Something informal about how to build a healthier work culture. Elias frowned. "I'm not great with crowds. Talk like you're sitting in your truck," the man replied. That Friday, Elias hosted an informal Friday afternoon tea in the break space on the 5th floor. No slides, no stage, just a few chairs, a coffee urn, and a handwritten note taped to the door. "Ask, listen, don't judge." Zoe was the first to arrive, then a programmer, then 3 more. Eventually, the small room filled up. People sat cross-legged. On the floor, Elias spoke about figuring out how to stretch a single tank of gas, to get his son to school and still make it home. About shaving in the mirror with cold water, just to see a father looking back, not a failure. He spoke slowly, no theatrics, no preaching, just stories. He ended with a simple sentence: "We don't need to be perfect to care for each other. We just need to show up." A young coder wrote it on a sticky note and stuck it to her monitor. 3 days later, it was printed on the company's coffee mugs. A week later, it appeared in the company-wide email as part of the new internal culture initiative. Celine watched it all from her office on the 34th floor. She didn't interfere, didn't issue any orders. But she knew something had changed, and it had started with a man who had nothing but a heart that knew how to listen. And Elisa's impact didn't end with quiet words. At a community housing construction site, he discovered that the foundation was using standard concrete far beyond what was necessary for the soil type, wasting material and money. He recommended a lighter mix, with better insulation for winter, which cut material costs by nearly 15%. Weeks later, at a vocational center for the homeless, he noticed the plumbing was installed against the sun's path, leaving the bathrooms cold every morning. Elias proposed a simple design fix that saved renovation costs and boosted energy efficiency. Not long after, the head of engineering admitted, "Carter doesn't just understand people, he understands buildings and how to make them worth living in." Time passed slowly but steadily. The first month, then the second, then the third. Elias still showed up to work on time, still wore neatly ironed shirts, still brought his lunch in a weathered metal box. And every evening, after wrapping up a shift at the construction site or in the project office, he returned to his faded silver truck, parked in a quiet lot behind an old grocery store no one at the company knew. Elias didn't hide it, but he didn't talk about it either. Not out of shame, but because he had a plan he hadn't finished yet. He wanted to walk into a new home. On his own paycheck, not a handout, not a gift. By the 4th month, he did just that. A small house on the western edge of Portland. 1 story, 2 bedrooms, a backyard, an open kitchen, and east-facing windows to catch the morning sun. Ivory-painted walls, brown tile roof. Not new, not fancy, but solid. Warm and his dot, Elias stood on the porch, keys in hand, while Micah bounced around like he was about to step into his own private universe. "We have our own sink, Dad, and a floor that doesn't creak every time we move." Micah laughed out loud. Elias just smiled, but inside, something cracked open relief and gratitude. That first night in the new house, they ate dinner under a bare ceiling light, just a folding table, 2 plastic chairs, and a pot of hastily made spaghetti. But to them, it was a feast. Micah twirled a forkful of noodles, looked at his father, and said, "You kept your promise. Mom would be proud." Elias froze for a moment. He pressed his lips together and nodded slightly. "Yeah, I think so too." Then they both sat in silence, not needing to say more. Just remembering a woman who once turned every kitchen into a home. The next day, Elias asked to leave work early to shop for essentials: blankets, pillows, an electric stove, basic kitchenware. As he was leaving the office, he happened to run into Celine in the elevator. "Where are you headed this time of day?" she asked, phone still in hand, but eyes directly on him. "Oh, I asked to leave early to pick up some things for the new house, just the basics. Still don't have a guest mattress yet." Celine gave a soft smile. "Need a second opinion. I mean, I am a woman. I could help prevent some tragic curtain choices or lumpy mattresses." Elias laughed. "You sang?" "I have bad taste. It's just offering professional advice." "No pressure," she shrugged. Half-teasing. Elias thought for a second, then nodded. "All right, but only if I can treat you to afternoon tea in return. I haven't had a chance to properly thank you." 2 hours later, they sat at a little tea shop near Cedar Square. Outdoor seating, cream-colored tablecloth, a pale green ceramic teapot, chamomile flowers floating in their cups. They didn't say much at first, but the silence wasn't awkward, just peaceful. Elias watched Celine as she observed the crowd passing by, her fingers gently swirling the cup. "Do you sit still like this often?" "Not really," she said. "But since I met you, I think I've started learning how to slow down again." Elias nodded. "I've been learning how to believe again. Believe that it's possible to start over. It's not easy, but it's not impossible." They talked more about the new house, about Micah, about gas stoves and the habit of leaving your wallet at the checkout counter. And somewhere between those stories, there was something neither of them said out loud, but both could feel. Something was beginning, softly, slowly, but real. They never called it dating. The first time was furniture shopping. The next was stopping by to taste the gingerbread Micah accidentally ruined. Then came a quiet weekend afternoon, when Celine asked Elias to help fix a window ledge in her apartment, something she could have easily hired someone to do. Elias arrived with a tool bag and a thermos of hot tea. Her apartment on the 18th floor was flooded with sunlight but had little color. A perfect place, but so quiet it felt cold. "You're the first person to step in here," she said as he unscrewed the wooden frame. Elias looked up. "You mean first?" "First who's not staff, not delivery, not here for a meeting." Elias didn't ask anything more. He simply nodded and went back to tightening screws, as if he already understood. After that, things unfolded in a rhythm that wasn't scripted but somehow felt in sync. They started having lunch together, not in the company cafeteria, but in small cafes tucked away on side streets. They texted. Not much. Just things like, "It's cold out. Don't forget your scarf. Does Micah prefer strawberry candy or something else? I never used to like green, but now it feels calming." Celine hadn't met Micah yet, but almost every time she went out, she bought something for the boy: a comic book, a puzzle set, a beanie with a goofy robot face. "I don't know why," she said when Elias asked. "It just feels like I owe him a proper hello." To others, affection might come loud, but for them it was quiet, subtle. Especially at work, Celine never spoke to Elias in the office unless necessary. They stayed in their roles. She was the one leading, and he was the one learning to stand tall again. But anyone paying close attention could tell a glance that lingered a second longer. A shared elevator ride. It's a nod too slight to be formal, but too full to be empty. One evening, Celine invited Elias over for dinner. Not a party, just a pot of stew and 2 chairs pulled side by side in her open kitchen. After the meal, they sat on the rug, backs resting against the glass wall, each holding a glass of light wine. Celine spoke about her childhood temporary homes, switching schools mid-year, good people who didn't stay long and bad ones who stayed too long. "I once fell in love," she said, eyes lowered to her wine. "Sophomore year of college. He was brilliant. I thought I'd been saved. But not everyone who takes your hand wants to hold it for long. When I needed him most, he let go." And I thought maybe I wasn't worth holding on to. Elias didn't tell her she was wrong. He just gently placed his hand over hers, warm, steady. Celine looked up. He looked at her like he saw everything she'd ever hidden and didn't run from it. The kiss didn't come from impulse, not from fleeting passion. It came from somewhere much deeper, a place where two people, both once broken, find one another. In quiet recognition, Elias leaned slightly toward her. Celine didn't pull away. Their lips met like they were touching something sacred, carefully, tenderly. When they pulled back, Celine let out a small, real smile. "This is scary," she whispered. "Yeah," Elias replied, "but worth it." That night, as Elias got ready to leave, she walked him to the door and handed him a small paper bag. "For Micah, it's a Ludo board game. I don't know if he'll like it." Elias took it. "He'll love it." He paused, then added, "And so will I." Celine stood in the doorway, watching him go. No one knew what tomorrow would bring. But there was one thing she was certain of, what she thought she'd never feel again. Love, trust, safety, it was coming. Back, slowly but surely. Spring arrived late in Portland, but inside the small house where Elias and Micah lived, something had already shifted. The air felt warmer, even if the skies outside still held a chill. One Friday afternoon, as the sun slanted across the porch, Elias sat across from his son at the dinner table and said, "Micah, I'm inviting Miss Celine over for dinner this weekend." Micah didn't object, but he didn't smile either. "She's just eating and then leaving, right?" Elias inhaled, keeping his voice light. "Yes, but she'll stay if you want to talk. No pressure." Micah only nodded, but his eyes were quieter than silence itself. Elias knew his son. The boy had grown up in wordless spaces, losing his mother at 8, friends moving away halfway through school years, dinners eaten in the truck by flashlight, and most of all, the love he held for his mother had never faded. Elias felt it too. But he also knew love wasn't meant to be a prison. He had once promised to keep living, and now Celine. She was. The first person who made him believe that could happen the right way. "I think your mom's watching from up there." And smiling, knowing you're being loved by someone new, Elias said. Micah bowed his head. His response wasn't no, but it wasn't quite yes either. Celine arrived Sunday evening, carrying a grape tart and a jar of orange marmalade she had made herself. Micah opened the door. He was polite, but his eyes didn't linger. On her, "Hi, Miss Celine," he said, then quickly turned and walked back inside. Celine wasn't surprised. She wasn't hurt. She understood. She had once been a child who wrapped every loss in silence, and she saw that same quiet in Micah, like looking at her younger self. During dinner, Celine didn't try to force conversation. She told stories about the time. She dropped an entire bag of tomatoes at the market, about how Elias once fixed her window with superglue and ended up gluing his hand to the handle. Micah chuckled once, just once. But Celine noticed after dinner she washed dishes with Elias. While drying a pair of chopsticks, she said quietly, "That boy loved his mother deeply." Elias nodded, eyes still on the sink. He used to think she was the only one patient enough to understand him. Celine smiled, her gaze still and calm. "I'm not trying to replace anyone. I just want to be present." In the weeks that followed, she didn't show up every day, didn't send gifts, didn't push. She came only when invited, always bringing something Micah might like: a book, a puzzle, a quiet little game. She sat far enough away not to intrude, but close enough not to feel absent. She listened, even when Micah said nothing. She nodded when he declined to play, and smiled softly when he asked, "Do you like LEGOs too?" Elias watched, but didn't interfere. He saw Celine peel fruit and leave it on the table for Micah without asking if he wanted any. He saw her, choose to sit on the steps while Micah kicked a ball around the yard, saying nothing, just waiting. He saw his son's eyes soften, his glances linger, and his thank yous begin to carry weight, no longer just courtesy. One Saturday evening, after a short baking session, Celine prepared to leave. Micah, as usual, stood by the door. She turned to go, and his voice called out softly behind her. Miss Celine. Celine stopped, turned back. Micah looked at her, a little unsure, but didn't look away. Thank you for today. That was all. But to Celine, it was a bridge built from two small steps of trust. She didn't hug him, didn't say thank you too. She simply nodded, gently, and walked away. That night, Elias poured 2 glasses of wine, handing one to Celine when she returned to the back porch. My son, she began, is a brave kid. Elias finished. They sat in silence. Across the lawn, Micah was lining up dominoes. He worked slowly, focused, and didn't look up. But Celine knew. He saw her, and for the first time, he didn't step back. 2 years had passed since the snowy night at the bus stop, since an old coat was offered in silence. 2 years since Elias. Carter first saw Celine Vaughn huddled beneath a flickering street lamp, never imagining she'd walk into his life not with fanfare or promises, but with quiet presence and irreplaceable grace. Micah was now 12. Taller, his voice a little deeper, still preferred burnt toast, and still pretended to hate hugs, though he sometimes wrapped others in small but steady arms. And Celine. She was no longer just Miss Celine. She was the one Micah turned to with tough math problems, the one who knew exactly which pencil set 2x4 his sketch, the one who calmed his unspoken tempers with warm banana bread. Micah didn't need to call her mom, but clearly she was family. They chose to hold the wedding in the fall. No media coverage, no designer gowns, no celebrity guest list, just a cozy ceremony at the Cedar Community Center, the first site Elias had supervised when he joined Nova Serra. Now, the once rough walls were painted bright, hung with children's art from the neighborhood. It was fitting a place of beginnings, renewal, and things that didn't need a price tag to prove their worth. Micah had one special job: ring bearer. He wore a white dress shirt, his tie slightly askew, but his smile was perfectly straight, no longer guarded, no longer distant. When Elias knelt to meet his son's gaze, their eyes met. No words were needed, only a quiet understanding. Celine walked in, holding a bouquet of white dahlias. Sunlight filtered through the windows, touching her hair like spring arriving late but gently. They stood before each other. No priest, no pastor, just one of Celine's childhood friends, someone who'd grown up with her in foster care in a few lines of witness. Elias held her hand, softly, the same way he once gave her that coat, quietly, without demand. Celine looked into his eyes. You once gave me your coat on a freezing night. Today, I give you the rest of my life, filled with light and warmth. No one sobbed aloud, but everyone's eyes were wet. Celine didn't need saving. She had saved herself. But she knew it was Elias who made her believe she was worthy of love, quiet, steady, and unshakable love. Elias didn't need to replace the wife he lost, but he understood, in a world so full of loss, to have someone to walk beside you again was the greatest gift time could return. After the ceremony, they went back to the little house. No wine, toasts, just pizza and apple pie. Kids laughing in the backyard. A few off-key ukulele notes. Celine still wore her wedding dress, barefoot, sitting on the steps with Micah sharing a chocolate bar pulled from the fridge. A photo was taken at the end of the day. Elias, Celine, and Micah standing beneath a blazing red maple tree. Behind them, the small house with the brown tile roof. Inside, in the living room on the ivory-painted wooden wall, The old coat had been framed and hung with care, not because it was beautiful, but because it had begun everything. Human kindness often starts with the smallest things, and sometimes all it takes is a coat to rewrite an entire life. After that autumn wedding, life didn't turn into a fairy tale, but each day was a new chapter, worth living and protecting. Elias Carter didn't stop after his community projects. He enrolled in evening leadership courses, often bringing his laptop and notebook to the local library or studying in the small office next to the kitchen. Celine always left coffee beside his keyboard. She never said anything, but its warm scent was always a quiet encouragement. "I believe you'll do great." She often said Dan. That was always enough. The project Elias supervised became widely known in the construction world for their sustainability and human-centered design, retirement homes with smart thermal systems, schools built with recycled materials that could withstand the state's harsh weather. His reputation grew. Novacera launched a new subsidiary focused on public infrastructure projects across the state. Elias was nominated to lead it not because he was the CEO's husband, but because he earned it. One June morning, while Elias was drafting structural specs for an overpass project in the suburbs, Celine walked into the office, placed her hand on his shoulder, and whispered, "We're going to have another little one." Elias looked at her, then down at the soft curve beneath her white blouse. And for the first time in years, he said nothing. He just held her for a very long time. 9 months later, at Portland Central Hospital, a baby girl was born. Celine named her Leora, meaning my light. Elias cried openly for the first time in front of his son. And Micah stood beside him, awkwardly watching the tiny, squirming newborn. Then whispered, "Hey little sis, hope you like Legos." Now, a family of 4, they still lived in the same little house, now expanded with an extra room. The same backyard, the same morning light through the windows, and still the same old coat. Framed on the wall, a quiet reminder, every big thing begins with a small act. And whenever someone asked Elias how he built something that mattered, he'd just smile and say, "Start by giving your coat to the person who's shivering and never asked for it back." What did you think of today's story? Have you ever received or given a small act of kindness that ended up changing your life in an unexpected way? Share your thoughts or stories in the comments. Snail Story is always here to listen to every word that comes from the heart. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. We'll see you again in the next video, where little things create something truly extraordinary. Wishing you a gentle, peaceful day.